We are ready for a deal. At the same time, we are preparing for the possibility that no satisfactory agreement is reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list, and we will defend the European interest as needed. In short, all options remain on the table. The clock is ticking. As the 9th of July approaches, the European Union is no longer negotiating in silence. Behind closed doors in Brussels, European leaders are finalizing their response. Because if there's no trade deal with the United States by the deadline, retaliation is no longer just an option. It's a plan. At the center of it all is Donald Trump. Once again, he's driving the story, issuing threats, pushing tariffs, and betting that the EU will blink first. But this time, Europe may be ready to call his bluff. Now, what a week and a half away from that deadline, the 9th of July, where the United States would impose 50% tariffs on the European Union. That is, it's really important that they get a deal right here, and it's one that is relatively balanced. Back in April, Trump reignited his trade war strategy with a sweeping policy he called liberation tariffs, a 10% baseline tax on all imports and up to 50% on specific countries or sectors. The European Union was put directly in the crosshairs. The message from Washington was clear. Agree to a new deal or face a 50% tariff wall on everything from steel and aluminum to auto parts and chemicals. Trump gave Europe until the 9th of July to accept the terms or suffer the consequences. This was not a negotiation. It was a deadline wrapped in pressure. Trump believed the EU, fragmented, cautious, and export-dependent, would fold quickly. But what followed was something else entirely. In Paris, the tone has shifted. President Emmanuel Macron, standing before the European Council, confirmed what many suspected. Europe is preparing to strike back. Behind the scenes, the European Commission has already drawn up a rebalancing list. It includes tariffs on iconic U.S. exports, aerospace, tech, and agriculture. According to Macron, European industries have already absorbed an estimated 60 billion euros in extra duties over the past year under Trump's trade policies. And while countries like Germany and Italy have signaled they might accept a 10% deal to avoid escalation, France has made it clear any long-term imbalance will be met with equal force. Europe isn't rushing to retaliate, but it's also not stepping back. The game has changed. What was once diplomacy is now defense. Meanwhile, financial markets are oddly calm. According to analysis by BNP Paribas, when Trump first floated the 50% tariff in May, Euro stocks dropped about 3% intraday, closing the day down 1.8%. But in recent weeks, volatility indicators across European indexes have remained flat. There's no pricing in of risk, no visible panic. Experts believe it's due to fatigue. Investors have heard this story before. Threats, bluster, then last-minute deals. But this time, complacency may be dangerous. If the U.S. imposes full tariffs and the EU responds, markets could snap violently. The Boeing-Airbus rivalry could become a trade war, and sectors from pharmaceuticals to automotives could be caught in the crossfire. Trump continues to promote his trade record as a personal victory tour. He's told crowds that every country wants a deal and that tariffs are just leverage to secure better terms. In recent weeks, he's claimed new victories with China and the UK, but the fine print tells a different story. The China deal still holds a 55% U.S. tariff on imports. The UK agreement skipped over critical sectors like steel. Talks with Canada remain unresolved. And now Europe is pushing back harder than anyone expected. For us yesterday. Ollie, some EU leaders then pushing for a quick solution. Still don't have the sectoral tariffs, and always the perennial concern with the Trump administration is that they may get something and then come back for more. The 9th of July is not just a deadline, it's a test of power. Trump built his presidency on the idea that pressure produces results. But with the EU now openly preparing retaliation, the pressure may finally swing back. The world is watching because if Europe follows through, if the retaliation hits, this won't just be another trade fight. It'll be the moment when even allies stop playing by Trump's rules. Did you pick the 2029 review? Because Donald Trump will be out of office. Will he be out of, January? I didn't realize that. Okay. Look, it's a natural time to review. We'll have enough information at that point. This June, President Trump stood at the NATO summit and claimed a major win. He had pushed America's allies to raise their defense spending to 5% of GDP, and they agreed. It was the kind of stage Trump thrives on, bold, loud, and all eyes on him. But while the spotlight stayed on Washington, something else happened. Canada, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, quietly charted a different path, not through confrontation, but through alignment. And it could reshape North America's economic future to have maximum US spillovers, like benefits in Canada of that spending to get jobs and others. Trump entered the NATO summit with a singular message: pay up. Under his pressure, member states agreed to raise defense spending from the long-standing 2% benchmark to 5% of GDP by 2035. It was the headline he wanted. It echoed across U.S. news cycles. He framed it as a victory for American leadership and his own deal-making skills. But while Trump was praising NATO's commitment, Canada was making another move. That's part of the reason why we're cooperating more closely with the Europeans. Carney wasn't just there to shake hands. He was there to signal a shift. On the sidelines of the NATO meeting, Canada and the European Union signed a sweeping security and industrial agreement. It covered defense procurement, energy cooperation, and joint development of critical infrastructure. No big press splash, no bragging tweets, but it was a statement, loud in its subtlety. Canada wasn't waiting for U.S. leadership. It was building alternatives. Just weeks earlier, at the G7 in Kanoskis, Trump gave Canada an ultimatum. He demanded a bilateral trade deal within 30 days or face increased tariffs. At the time, Canada was already under a 25% tariff on most exports to the U.S. and 50% on steel and aluminum. Carney didn't push back directly. Instead, he doubled down on Canada's partnership with Europe. While Trump kept touting his 90 deals in 90 days initiative, Canada quietly signed a strategic pact with the EU, locking in military and industrial cooperation. Meanwhile, the U.S.-Canada deal, still nowhere near finished. By late June, only 2 frameworks had been signed under Trump's tariff blitz, one with the UK and one with China. And Canada, America's largest trading partner, was already warning it could escalate retaliatory tariffs by mid-July if talks failed. Trump may have been trying to corner Canada at the G7, but Carney turned that pressure into leverage and made Washington look isolated. Do you feel more comfortable in Brussels than in Washington? A few days later, at the EU-Canada summit in Brussels, the contrast grew sharper. During a joint press event, Carney was asked a loaded question whether he felt more comfortable in Brussels than in Washington. He answered with a smile. Well, in terms of relative comfort? Well, it's very hot in Washington right now and very humid. I'm sure that dinner, will be better. But his message was clear. Canada and Europe, he said, share values on labor rights, sustainability, and defending democracy, especially in Ukraine. He highlighted Europe's 18th sanctions package against Russia, which Canada supported with its own financial sanctions and military aid. He confirmed Canada would join the Ukraine Reconstruction Conference and had just approved new arms shipments to Kyiv. At no point did Carney criticize the U.S. He didn't have to. By emphasizing shared values, shared action, and shared burdens, he let the contrast speak for itself. Trump's world is one of deals, pressure, and dominance. Carney's message: coalitions, long-term vision, and quiet power. And when it came to defense procurement, Canada was already in talks to buy fighter jets and submarines from European partners. No American suppliers mentioned. Trump thought he held the upper hand with tariffs, pressure, and public ultimatums. But Mark Carney didn't fight back on Trump's terms. He built a broader alliance, one that didn't need Washington's permission. And as Canada pivots toward Europe, one question remains. Is Trump still leading, or is he being left behind? Mark Rutte, the NATO chief who is your friend. He called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children? No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard. Okay. No. He did. He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. At this year's NATO summit in The Hague, diplomacy took an unexpected turn. In a room full of generals and prime ministers, the spotlight wasn't on Ukraine or defense spending. It was on Donald Trump, not for a treaty, not for a policy shift, but because the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, called Trump daddy. That moment made headlines. And that was just one of the many surreal moments from Trump's weird NATO press conference. They had a big fight like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easier to stop them. And then daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get strong. It began with the daddy moment. Mark Rutte, trying to describe Europe's dependence on the US, said some countries sounded like children asking if their father was staying with the family. Trump embraced it completely. He compared NATO members to kids fighting in a schoolyard. His solution? Let them fight a little, then step in with strong language. That's how he described his leadership. The official White House, this is the official White House Twitter page or X page, posting a short video announcing, "Daddy's home," and the White House ran with it. Hours later, its official exec account posted a short video titled, "Daddy's home," turning the awkward moment into a meme, and the meme into a message. Trump used the moment to reaffirm that NATO was, in his words, now listening. He pointed to a new agreement. By 2035, all 32 NATO members are expected to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. That's more than double the current target. For Trump, that number wasn't just a policy win. It was a symbol of dominance. He told reporters, one NATO official said the increase only happened because you came along. He even introduced the CNN correspondent with sarcasm. Oh, fake news, CNN. And followed it with a blanket condemnation. You and NBC fake news, which is one of the worst. And CNN, New York Times, are all bad. They're sick. There's something wrong with them. In tone and content, it wasn't a press briefing. That was the story he wanted to tell. Trump as disciplinarian, Trump as the father figure, and NATO as the obedient children. But the summit didn't end with strategy. It ended with spectacle. At the closing press conference, Trump didn't call on reporters by name. He called them by outfit. I'm picking the beauties today. Yeah, blue dress. Go ahead. White dress. It was a trial, a moment where Trump cast himself as the judge, jury, and prosecutor of the American media live from Europe. Just days before, as major networks criticized his decision to bomb Iran, Trump lashed out at the media. CNN, Mississippi, NBC, anyone who questioned his account of what happened. He demanded apologies, called them real losers, and dismissed reports that the strikes had failed. The mission, he insisted, had sent the right message, even if peace hadn't come. Well, they should give me the Nobel Prize for Rwanda, and if you look the Congo, or you could say Serbia, Kosovo, you could say a lot of them. You could say, the big one is India and Pakistan. I should have gotten it 4 or 5 times. Trump's flair didn't start at NATO. Before that, he had already launched something even more theatrical. Amid the global tensions and headlines, Trump launched a campaign for the Nobel Peace Prize. In a recent interview, Trump insisted he should have already won it 4 or 5 times. He listed Rwanda, Congo, Serbia, Kosovo, India, and Pakistan. He even cited the Abraham Accords. And here's where the story turns, because it wasn't just Trump saying it. In mid-June, before the Iran strike, several allies had nominated him. Pakistan praised his mediation in the Middle East. A Ukrainian lawmaker submitted a formal letter. Even Congressman Buddy Carter publicly endorsed the idea. But after the bombing, everything changed. Pakistan withdrew its support, condemning the strike. The Ukrainian legislature reversed his position. The irony was complete. Trump had received real nominations for a peace prize, only to bomb his way out of them within 72 hours. At NATO, Trump stood center stage, not just as a political leader, but as a self-declared peacemaker, wartime commander, and misunderstood father figure. He called allies children. He called reporters fake. He called himself the man who stopped wars just after starting another one. In the end, this wasn't about diplomacy. It wasn't even about legacy. It was about recognition. About proving he could still dominate the room, the headlines, and maybe in his mind, the Nobel Committee, too.